This Amiga 1000 sat abandoned in a leaky shed for over 20 years. Just another old machine slowly fading away. But when I powered it on, the screen came to life, as if it had been waiting for me all along.
It is the best machine that is around anywhere in the world.
The professional machine of the future.
How would I describe it?
I think it's fantastic.
Awesome. It's going to skyrocket. Only Amiga makes it possible.
Only Amiga makes it possible. Only Amiga makes it happen.
Last time on 64 Commodore, we took a look at the introduction of the Commodore 64 in 1982 and how it began changing the world of home computing. But there was another story that started that same year, hidden inside a small startup in California where a handful of engineers who had just left Atari were quietly building the future. We're going to look at how that team pushed custom silicon further than anyone thought possible, with smooth animation, amazing audio, and thousands of colors on the screen all at once. It wasn't just going to be more powerful, it was going to be different. And it came surprisingly close to never making it out the door. We'll explore the early prototypes, the custom chips, and the behind-the-scenes drama that almost kept it from ever seeing the light of day. Later, we'll take a look at this Amiga 1000 that lay abandoned for decades, but now lives again. This is one of the earliest models, built in 1985, the very year the Amiga 1000 launched. So, let's go back to the beginning, to the team that didn't just think different, they were clever enough to hide what they were doing in plain sight.
Business has become more competitive than ever before. Today, we need new solutions, new creativity.
Amiga. You must see it.
In 1982, a handful of engineers left Atari and started over. No corporate backing, no headquarters, just a dream, and a handful of dentists with enough money and faith to give the idea a shot. They initially called their company Hi-Toro, though they soon changed it to Amiga Incorporated, partly because friends and family thought Hi-Toro sounded more like a lawnmower brand. Amiga, Spanish for a female friend, sounded more friendly, and conveniently came before both Apple and Atari in the phone book. To stay under the radar, they released some quirky products like the Joyboard, a floor-based balance controller for the Atari 2600. You would sit or stand on it and then shift your weight to move, kind of like an early Wii balance board. It looks like a harmless novelty, but that was the point. I don't think anyone suspected that behind the scenes, they were building the most advanced home computer that the world had ever seen. They called her Lorraine, after Dave Morse's wife, in keeping with their practice of naming their prototype accessories after women. She wasn't a product yet, but what the team was building in a borrowed lab in Santa Clara was the beginning of something extraordinary. To achieve their goal, they would end up needing much more than clever distractions. By the end, they would need new custom silicone, stubborn optimism, and the kind of grit that only happens when everything is on the line. This would be nothing short of a full skunkworks project.
Only Amiga makes it possible. Only Amiga makes it happen.
That skunkworks project started with a simple question. What exactly were they building? Some on the team, especially the investors, pictured a next-generation game console, fast, colorful, and affordable. But Jay Miner was thinking bigger. He wanted a complete computer that could handle video, sound, animation, and multitasking, all years ahead of anything else on the market. What they built wasn't quite a game console, but it wasn't quite a workstation either. It carried the DNA of both and completely redefined what a home computer system could be. At its center is the Motorola 68000, a chip that feels almost alien compared to the 8-bit processors available at the time. While it only has a 16-bit data bus, its internal registers are a full 32-bit, and it has a clean architecture and instruction set that makes assembly language programming feel beautiful. Most impressive is that it can handle up to 16 megabytes of RAM at a time when most home computers were limited to 64 kilobytes. And it does it with an efficiency that makes the Amiga's multitasking operating system possible. But the plan was never for the Motorola 68000 to do everything on its own. It's the traffic cop, managing high-level tasks and directing the flow of data while the custom chips do all the heavy lifting. That's what makes the Amiga special. Before any of those chips could be made, they first had to prove their ideas the hard way. To do that, they built Lorraine, a living prototype made entirely out of off-the-shelf parts on wire-wrapped circuit boards. Standing in front of those wire-wrapped towers, you realize just how bold the team was. I've done wire wrap myself in the past, and the attention to detail it took to make something this intricate is nothing less than extraordinary. Every colored strand represents a thought, a decision, a late night spent chasing perfection. From that web of wire would eventually come the first custom chips, shrinking the impossible into silicon. And when they would finally come together, the result wouldn't just be a computer, it would be the soul of the Amiga. Agnes controls system memory and manages direct memory access. She also contains two of the Amiga's secret weapons, the blitter and the copper. The blitter moves entire blocks of graphics in memory without touching the CPU. And the copper makes real-time changes to display registers mid-frame so the CPU doesn't have to sit around and wait. And the result is smooth, dynamic graphics, even while the processor is busy doing something else. Daphne, the early display chip, turns memory into video, managing bit planes, playfields, and sprites to create those layered visuals that later defined the Amiga's look. She supported multiple resolutions and color modes, allowing developers to mix sharp details and colors in a way no home computer had managed before. Portia handles sound and a lot more. She provides 4-channel stereo audio with sampled playback. But she also reads the keyboard, manages its serial and parallel ports, and keeps the system connected to the outside world. She's the bridge between the system and the person sitting in front of it. And everything you hear flows through her. You can almost think of them as living parts of the same organism. Agnes is the heart, pumping data through the system and giving rhythm and life to everything the Amiga does. Daphne is the eyes, shaping color and motion with painterly precision. Portia is the ears and the hands, the interface between the human and the machine. Together, they make the Amiga more than just a piece of technology. They make it into something that feels alive.
Although this thing is capable of actually accompanying you, singing or playing a wind instrument.
Have you ever heard me sing? Don't
sing,
right.
Just play to. If you were a musician, you'd really be impressed.
Still, it was a good note to end on.
Amiga's Santa Clara office wasn't just a skunkworks. It was a clubhouse where people worked hard, slept under desks, and filled whiteboards with new ideas. Jay Minor's dog Mitchie roamed the lab while debates raged over what the machine should become and how to achieve those goals. Everyone knew that they were building something that had to stand out. All those late nights and prototypes had built to one moment. In January of 1984, it was time to show the industry what they had built at the annual Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. The team brought Lorraine to the show set it up quietly in a private suite near the show floor. Only a few people were invited to see what they'd built. The first day's demo was simple, if not a bit rough, more of a hardware test than a showcase. It proved the system worked, but it didn't really turn heads. That night after dinner, RJ Michael and Dale Luck snuck back into that private suite and began coding again. They worked through the night on a new demo from scratch, what would become the infamous Boing Ball, a red and white ball with a shadow bouncing against a checkered background in real time. No video trickery was involved. The Blitter and the Copper were doing it live. It stunned everyone who saw it, and they scrambled to bring back everyone who'd seen their demo the day before. Some even looked under the table for a hidden VCR. The Boing Ball may have bought them time, but what really defined the team wasn't just the technology, it was the people behind it. Back in the lab, their humor found its way right into the system. During late nights in the lab, RJ would sit on one of their very own joy boards, trying to stay perfectly still while waiting to see if their latest build would crash. If he wobbled, they joked that he'd failed his guru meditation. That joke ended up getting baked right into the operating system itself. When the system crashed, it didn't just say software failure, it displayed a guru meditation error, as if the system were calmly reflecting on what went wrong. Crashes are never welcome, but that guru meditation error always gave me a chuckle and made them much easier to tolerate, especially when the solution was a quick Control Amiga away. And then there's Joe Pillow, the story that refuses to die. It's often told that they reserved an airline seat to take the Lorraine prototype to CES, and when the airline required a name, they typed in Joe Pillow. In reality, for CES, the machines traveled boxed, probably on a seat, but no name, no story. I got the real story from Dale Luck himself at the 2025 VCF Midwest show. About a month after CES, RJ and Dale found themselves returning from the SoftCon Developer Conference in New Orleans. When they boarded the plane, they found an empty seat between them, so they piled some heavy brochures, a backpack, and Dale's jacket on it. Seeing that it looked kind of like a person, they wrapped the jacket around the backpack and then added an airline pillow with a smiley face drawn on the slipcover. The flight attendants didn't notice until the doors had closed, and it was too late. Before long, everyone wanted to meet Joe. He ordered drinks, read paperwork, and took a nap on Dale's shoulder. And when RJ started a mock panic about Joe getting airsick with a shredded napkin in a barf bag, everyone joined in laughing. He made such an impression that his name lives on, molded inside every Amiga 1000 case, right along with the real engineers and Mitchie. The demos got badly needed attention, but back in California, the situation was fragile. Money was running out. The original investors had pulled back after the game market crashed the year before and were unwilling to invest further. And without new funding, everything they'd built might be lost.
When you were growing up, you learned you were facing a world full of competition. There were so many of you with all the right credentials. To succeed today, you need a way to stand out from the crowd, to make the most of your special kind of music. Introducing Amiga, the computer that gives you undreamed of creative power to work faster and more productively. With built-in color graphics no other comes close to. Amiga, the first personal computer to give you a creative edge.
Success on the CES show didn't fix the greater problem waiting back home. The demo had proved that Lorraine worked, but turning fragile wire-wrapped boards into real silicon required serious money. Since the original investors were unwilling to invest further, the situation was dire. Their quest stood on the edge of a knife. Had they strayed but a little, all might be lost, yet hope remained. At times, cash was so tight that Dave Morse and Jay Miner both remortgaged their homes just to keep the lights on. Yet they never missed a payroll, a point employees remember to this day. By March of 1984, the cash had nearly run out. So Amiga Incorporated accepted a $500,000 bridge loan from Atari, still under Warner Communications. While the loan bought them a few weeks, It also tied their fates to Atari, a company still reeling from the video game crash the prior year. They began exploring a licensing deal with Atari that would see Amiga's chips used in future game machines, but nothing was ever implemented. Meanwhile, Jack Tramiel, recently departed from Commodore, was seeking his next conquest. Knowing that their situation was dire, he began circling Amiga.
You have to have an attitude that it's war and it's there to win. You have to be the winner.
The team asked for $3 a share, and Tramiel countered with $2. Morse dropped to $2.75, so Tramiel came back with $1.50, then $1.25, then 98 cents. As RJ Michael later said, instead of negotiating to get us to say yes, they started negotiating to see how far they could push us to still say yes as the deal got worse and worse. Then the situation changed again. Tramiel started moving to acquire Atari's consumer division, meaning that if he succeeded, he could gain control of Amiga through that outstanding loan without paying Amiga a cent directly. Just days before the deadline, Commodore stepped in. Their offer? $4 a share, enough to keep the lights on and get a little something for all their effort. So Morse took it to the team, who told him to take the money and run. So when he went back to close the deal, he told Commodore that the engineers weren't happy with the price. Commodore bumped it to $4.25 and Morse took the deal. On June 29th, Amiga cut Atari a check and repaid the $500,000 loan 1 day before it came due. 2 days later, on July 2nd, Jack Tramiel took control of Atari, without Amiga. Tramiel's Atari even sued Amiga for breach of contract, but the case was quietly settled out of court a few years later. Commodore's buyout had saved the company, and now they had the backing to build real machines. What came next would prove whether all that technology would live up to the promise that they had fought so hard to keep alive. But Commodore's rescue was just the beginning. Next, Amiga would have to prove itself in front of the whole world.
Only Amiga makes it possible.
Commodore's buyout gave the team a second chance and started a whole new race against time. For the first time, the custom chips could move from wire-wrap prototypes to real silicon. Agnes, Portia, and Daphne went out for fabrication, and when the first samples came back alive, the Amiga wasn't just a theory anymore. It was buildable. As the design moved towards production, some of those original code names changed too. Daphne became Denise, Portia became Paula, and Agnes stayed Agnes, still at the heart of everything. For the engineers who spent years bringing those prototypes to life, holding those initial chip samples must have felt like crossing the finish line. But now the deadlines got real. Schedules tightened, and the focus shifted from proving what the machine could do to proving it could ship. Engineers moved towards making something manufacturable without losing the character that made the Amiga special. You can even see some of those pressures in the way the Amiga 1000 starts up. Kickstart still wasn't fully mature when production began, so it loads from a floppy disk into 256K of special RAM on a daughter board. A clever but expensive workaround that let production begin while the OS was still evolving. That added cost, but it bought time. But Commodore's cost goals left their own mark. The base model shipped with just 256K of RAM, but knowing that wouldn't be enough, engineers slipped in a front-loading expansion slot so users could double it later. And then there's the keyboard. It's solid, mechanical, and expensive. The kind of thing you'd expect to see cut under corporate pressure. But it stayed. I'm sure that was a small victory for engineers who wanted the Amiga to feel as good as it looked. Together, those choices tell a story of evolution under stress. One to save time, one to save money, and one to preserve quality. And each adaptation kept the machine moving forward. Some flourishes still made it through. Lift the lid and you find the signatures of the original team. A small human mark on a machine that was about to make history. The prototypes were working, the chips were real, and the first production units were within reach. All that was left was to show the world what the Amiga could do.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Commodore welcomes you to Lincoln Center. My name is Bob Truckenbrode, Vice President of Marketing for Commodore. And I will be your host for what promises to be a very exciting exhibition. For tonight is the world premiere of Amiga.
By July of 1985, the Amiga 1000 was ready to face the world, or at least ready enough. Commodore wanted a debut that would make headlines, not just spec sheets, so they rented Lincoln Center in New York City, a venue more familiar with stage lights than computer screens. This wasn't business as usual. They attempted to scan Debbie Harry of Blondie's face live, but the contrast came up poor, so they quickly pulled up a test image they'd done earlier, and Andy Warhol began painting it in the software that would eventually be known as Deluxe Paint. What no one in the audience knew is that the flood fill could crash with one wrong click, and of course Andy Warhol clicked everywhere.
We have asked our resident Amiga artist, Jack Hager, to sit in with him.
Are you ready to paint me?
Yeah. You found it to be very spontaneous, haven't you?
Yeah, it's great. It's such a great thing. So now we'll do the hair. So we'll go up to color and pick yellow.
Andy is selecting from the menu bar, which gives you all the features of the paint system, and he's selecting fill. And this is a slow version of the fill, just so you can see how Andy decides to work. Now this is an instance of a leaky flood fill.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of pretty. I think I'll keep it.
Okay.
Oh, it's beautiful.
What computers have you worked on before?
Oh, I've worked on anything. I've waited for this one.
Really?
Backstage, the team held their breath, then breathed again as the system held. It was the perfect symbol of what the Amiga was meant to be, a machine where technology and creativity met. Commodore followed with a sleek television ad, slick, dreamlike, and more than a little confusing.
We experience the mind unbounded. Amiga, the first personal computer that gives you a creative edge.
It said almost nothing about specs, and everything about ambition. This was not just a normal home computer. Once the Amiga reached real users, everything changed. For the first time, a home computer didn't feel like just another beige box that you just tolerated. It could draw, talk, animate, and multitask all at once. In Deluxe Paint, you could create artwork that looked ready for television. Within months, studios were using early Genlocks to combine computer graphics and video, something no other home computer could do. This wasn't a toy, it was a creative workstation that just happened to fit in your living room. For me, it was light years ahead of anything I'd seen before, and it wasn't just beautiful on screen, it was built to last. When I started bringing this machine back to life, it reminded me just how solid the engineering was. After decades in terrible storage, it powered up with a quiet confidence, a testament to how much care went into building it. Now there were a few surprises along the way, of course, but that's part of what makes restoring a classic like this so rewarding.
In New York today, Commodore International unveiled a new personal computer it hopes will give a boost to that troubled business. Pop artist Andy Warhol was on hand to show off the machine's graphics generating capabilities, which the company calls a major sales feature, and the computer even talks.
Now it's the time for all good men to buy Amigas.
The new Amiga is designed to compete with Apple's Macintosh, and with a $1,300 price tag, costs less money.
This Amiga 1000 was manufactured in 1985, the very first year that the Amiga was built. When I opened it up, I expected the worst. It had been sitting for over 20 years in a leaky shed, and that usually leads to mold, corrosion, or worse. And directly underneath the table upon which his Amiga sat was an absolute nightmare, so I expected the worst. But instead, what I found was one of the cleanest survivors I have ever worked on. Even the fan, which on many Amiga 1000s gets quite loud over time, was quiet as a whisper as soon as I powered it on. The power supply tested perfectly and the main board was spotless, with all the custom ICs still in the original sockets. The internal floppy drive was cleaned and relubricated before its first test, and it rewarded the effort by reading discs flawlessly. It came with 2 external drives, a 3.5-inch A1010 and the rare 5.25-inch A1020, plus a correct Amiga mouse with its right-angled connector, a matching Amiga 1080 monitor, an original Commodore A1300 Genlock, and a Starboard 2 sidecar expansion that adds 2 megabytes of RAM, a 68881 math coprocessor, and a real-time clock. That expansion alone makes this Amiga 1000 surprisingly capable, even by late 1980s standards. The Starboard 2 did have a leaking AAA battery, but the damage was minimal. So I neutralized and cleaned up the battery damage, verified that the machine was operating, and then replaced the rubber isolation pads that had turned sticky over time. There was also some corrosion in the bottom of the case, probably from a combination of the leaking battery and condensation over the years, so I cleaned that up as well. The Joy board, used earlier in this episode, was also restored, cleaned, inspected, and tested. Given its age and fragility, the actual balance test was left to people much younger and lighter than me. The real challenge was the mouse. It looked fine, but it would only just barely jiggle the pointer. As I worked on it, at first I assumed it matched the published schematic. It turned out to be an earlier revision using tiny 1206 surface mount resistors and a quad comparator that basically is 4 LM339s on a chip. Over the decades, the LEDs and photoreceptors had drifted, weakening the signal so the Denise chip couldn't read it. After tracing the circuit, I found a solution. Piggybacking 510 ohm resistors over the existing 270 ohm ones adjusted the reference voltage for each comparator. That restored full TTL levels, and suddenly the mouse sprang back to life. The keyboard, on the other hand, was gross. Every key came apart for a complete cleaning, and now it feels as crisp as it did in 1985. Everything came together beautifully. Sysinfo confirms it's a stock Amiga 1000 with a Motorola 68000 CPU, 512K of base RAM, plus 2 megs on the Starboard 2. As with every Amiga 1000 I've ever seen, it has the 256K chip RAM expansion in the front slot. After that, it's easy to see why this computer captured so many imaginations. It performs flawlessly, and it looks fantastic after a gentle round of sun brightening earlier this summer. And this is where it gets really funny. This is how I found it, buried under a mountain of boxes, cables, and who knows what else in the corner of that leaky shop. It's not often that being buried in junk actually saves a computer. While only a few feet away, time had made an utter disaster, this one stayed dry and insulated by 20 years of clutter. A survivor from the dawn of the multimedia revolution and ready to inspire a whole new generation. And this machine is going to get a special place right next to my main PC where I can use it every day.
Only Amiga.
Only Amiga.
Only Amiga. Only Amiga.
Only Amiga.
Only Amiga.
Only Amiga.
Only Amiga.
Makes it possible.
Only Amiga.
Only Amiga makes it possible.
As part of this project, this Amiga 1000 now joins a growing lineup of machines restored for this series. Each one a small piece of computing history preserved and working once again. Restoring it wasn't just about reconnecting circuits, it was about reconnecting with the imagination that made Amiga such an exciting part of computing history. And if you've enjoyed this look at the machine that kick-started a dream, stay tuned, because in the next episode of 64 Commodore, we're going to take a look at the Commodore 64's explosive rise to power in part 2 of the evolution of the Commodore 64. If you haven't seen it yet, check out this video that introduced the 64 Commodore series, and thanks for coming!